with 4 days of what they call military training. Their words, not mine. Military training for its 5 and 6-year-olds in kindergarten. The children, dressed in military fatigues, held Chinese flags, performed salutes, according to the official WeChat social media account. WeChat is like their Facebook, okay? The school principal said in a speech that it was the goal to encourage children to be strong and preserve like young Chinese soldiers. The root of current political campaign reaches back to 2013, soon after Mr. Xi ascended to power. That year, party leaders wrote a policy memo called Document Number 9, which warned of 7 threats to the party, including the rise of the Western notion of civil society and the free press. It called on party members to strengthen resistance to infiltration by outside ideas. Free press is one of the 7 threats to the party. A free press. Think about that, folks. Think about that. Now, in 2016, the government appointed a new education minister, Chen Bao-seng, who pushed for more patriotic teaching. Now, Mr. Chen was a party veteran whose main academic experience was serving as vice president of the Communist Party's Central School, which trains party cadres. Now, Mr. Xi was the school's president during Mr. Chen's tenure there. Yes, before he became premier, Xi Jinping ran schools. He was an educator. That's why he's doing what he's doing, folks. In a speech that year, Mr. Chen warned that hostile forces versed in international language, or internal language, I should say, were trying to subvert China's educational system to weaken the party and spread the wrong kind of thinking. In quotes, once a student comes into contact with it, they are easily deceived, and it's the equivalent of the white cloth entering the dye vat. Now, the solution is to deny accessibility to Google, to Facebook, to anything outside the Chinese propaganda machine. Because once the student, I mean, this is what Mr. Chen says, the guy running the show. Once the student comes into contact with it, they are easily deceived. In other words, once they read the truth, they understand, and you've lost them. So the solution is deny them any other external source. Now, the Chinese government reversed a policy that allowed provincial governments to choose their own textbooks and required that any learning material dealing with national sovereignty, ethnicity, and religion had to be approved by authorities. Government authorities, federal government employees. Now, it also rewrote textbook sections, including the extension of China's war with Japan back in the 30s and 40s. They just extended it by 6 years to describe more acts of Japanese aggression towards the Chinese. Now, when they're talking about leaders of China in these books, Mr. Xi's name appears 46 times. Mao's only 16. Notice me, notice me, notice me. Now, 3 different Chinese teachers described in interviews said that there were efforts to silence debate in the schools over the party's achievements. These 3 teachers said that they were asked to give poor grades to exam essays if the students took unapproved stances, such as portraying the government's handling of COVID-19 in a negative light. Think about that. If you don't do the government's bidding, if you don't say the government is anything but spectacular, you get a bad grade. You get a bad grade, you don't get a job. So is it any wonder that a lot of students are giving the thumbs up? They really don't have a choice. Now, in Beijing, authorities introduced a program with compulsory student visits to museums with nationalist and revolutionary messages. Now, one features an exhibition devoted to Mr. Xi with a painting of youths admiring him, echoing Mao-era images of the leader surrounded by adoring young people. It's almost comical, but that's what he's doing. Now, a preschool in the city of Yiyang had students dressed in army green Communist Party suits and walked to a nearby park to commemorate the Long March. That was a year-long 5,600-mile trek made by the Red Soldiers to escape naturalist forces during the Civil War. That was Mao versus Chiang. Now, the children stopped to harvest sweet potatoes and wild vegetables for lunch, just like during the 30s march. That's according to a website ran by China's propaganda ministry. Now, the education ministry also made changes to the at the university level, requiring universities to boost Marxist education. The charters of some prestigious universities were amended to place absolute adherence to party rule over academic independence. This year, China updated its law of the protection of minors, striking independent thinking from the list of assets schools are meant to cultivate. I'm going to read that again because it's important. This year, China updated its law of the protection of minors, striking independent thinking from the list of assets schools are meant to cultivate. In other words, schools are not meant to cultivate independent thinking. That's been scratched. They don't want people to think independently anymore. In 2016, the party issued what they said were reform guidelines, calling its Communist Youth League to help take the lead on social media. Now, the Youth League began opening accounts on platforms like Douyin. Okay, that's China's version of TikTok. Okay, it also started an official account on Bilibili, which is Chinese YouTube. Okay, and this is popular among the young people, and that's what they're getting into. By the way, YouTube is blocked in China. You can't get onto YouTube in China. It's against the law. It's blocked. Now, the Communist Youth League has an online following nearly as large as CNN. In other words, this is no small deal. A lot of people follow this deal. Now, a graduate from China's Inner Mongolia University analyzed 541 Communist Youth League videos published between March of 2018 and March of 2020 and found that the videos focused on patriotic or otherwise pro-party content and had 130 million likes and logged on by more than 100,000 different comments. Again, you're encouraged to do this. If you don't do this, you get a bad grade in school, okay? And it goes on and on and on with cartoons. The Chinese are rabbits, the U.S. are eagles, the Brits are bulls, and the French are chickens. And the French and the British are often, the chickens and the bulls are often seen as doing the bidding of the American eagle, who's sometimes seen chomping on a cigar and issuing orders. Okay? Now, some Chinese parents in an interview said they didn't mind the rise in patriotic content. Now, unlike in Hong Kong, where some parents were unnerved by the increase in patriotic behavior in the schools and changes in textbooks, many in China just are apathetic about it. Now, they're apathetic. Does that mean that they're frightened? Or they're just too tired to care? Yeah, what the heck? Things are pretty good here. We'll just let it go. Go with the flow. Now, one teacher said her students recognized propaganda. Some of her students recognize the propaganda, and they often sigh or make faces when encountering these political texts. One study, though, suggests that at least some students are embracing the message. Now, young people realize China's power, and they're proud of it, the academics wrote, unlike earlier generations who regarded China as a backwards country and believed Western values could change it. Many even dreamed of moving to the West. Okay? Now, loving your country isn't a bad thing. And if you think about it, the Chinese people do have many reasons to be proud of their accomplishments, especially like the economic accomplishments. They've really come a long way economically. You can't deny that. But if you have to change textbooks, and if you have to ban international media and call a free press a detriment to the party, I mean, This, my friends, dear listeners, is an unsustainable model for success. You can't do it. Now, how have they eroded freedoms in China? Did you know the following sites are blocked in China? I'm going to read you a partial list of websites you cannot get to in China because they've been blocked. If you're in China, you cannot access Google, YouTube, Facebook, Wikipedia, Microsoft OneDrive. You can't access Netflix or Zoom or Bing or Twitter or Tumblr or Pinterest or Amazon.co.jp, the Japanese Amazon. Why Japanese? I don't know. You can't access WhatsApp. You can't access the BBC or the New York Times website or the UK Guardian or Chinese Google Maps. You can't even go into Chinese Google Maps and look at how the country is, okay? The Washington Post, Bloomberg, Huffington Post, all blocked. The UK Independent, Reuters, Le Monde, which is the New York Times in France, NBC News, Time, NHK, JPL, the CBC, that's the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, The Economist magazine, HBO, Al Jazeera. Hundreds more are blocked in China. You only have one news source, friends, if you're in China. And that's what the Chinese government gives you. That's all you got. And you don't got no more. Now, we've looked at two different ways, two different sources. The Chinese government putting the screws to U.S. business in Hong Kong and Xi trying to re-educate his people. Okay? That's what dictators do. Now, what about public opinion outside of China? Is this a U.S. thing or is this a worldwide thing? It's a worldwide thing, and it's becoming more and more a worldwide thing. Not just us, but other countries in the world. In fact, let's go back to March of 2019. President Xi flew to Paris to meet with French President Macron, German Chancellor Merkel, and the then president of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. Now, after toasting flutes of champagne and doing all the good stuff, the Chinese president pressed the three leaders. This is according to an official present. Now, he pressed them by saying, by referencing a recent EU policy paper that described China as a systematic rival. And Xi asked, did the Europeans really mean it? Did you really mean to call us a systematic rival? Now, Mrs. Merkel demurred with a comment from Mr. Xi saying, the language showed that Europe recognized China's growth and strength and influence. Mr. Juncker cut the tension with a joke about the EU's inability to agree on what China really even was. But Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, was very blunt. It's true, said the French president. You are our rival. Mr. Xi was gobsmacked. Now, a few weeks later, France sent a warship through the Taiwan Strait, provoking Beijing, which accused the frigate of illegally entering Chinese waters because they consider Taiwan part of China. Now, inside China, Mr. Xi's authority is increasingly seen as absolute. He's sidelined rivals, he's silenced dissidents, and bolstered his popularity by promoting a resurgent China unafraid to assert its interests. Now, the biggest challenge to his vision for China comes not within its own borders, but from other parts of the world, other nations who view Beijing as having dramatically changed in just the last few years. Now, once upon a time, countries once avoided upsetting Beijing and were moving closer to Washington's harder and bipartisan stance. Now, they were hesitant to curb Chinese access to customers, technologies, and sensitive infrastructure. That was a few years ago. How have things changed? Let's look at this Pew Research poll of basically the big pro-Western countries. The Pew Research poll asks, what are the percentage of people who have no confidence, zero confidence in President Xi to do the right thing regarding world affairs? In Japan, from 2014 to today, 84% of Japanese have no confidence that Xi will do the right thing regarding world affairs. 84%, no confidence. In South Korea, it was 40% in 2016. It's 83% today. In Sweden, it was 60% in 2014. It's 82% today. In France, it was 60% in 2014. It's 80% today. In Australia, it was 40% in 2014. Only 40%. Today in Australia, 79% of the people have no confidence that Xi will do the right thing in world affairs. In Germany, In 2014, it was 60%. It's 78% today. In the U.S., it was 55% in 2014, 77% today. In the UK, only 45% in 2014.